You're the son of a king. You're the grandson of one of the most respected and feared leaders in Iran, Reza Khan, the Majesty, who he was a whole different type of leader. When you drop his name, it's a different kind of respect you get from people that are older. You ask somebody younger right now, they don't really know what it is. They know about your father. But your grandfather was a superior general. He was a doer. He got things done and loved and hated at the same time. But I want to talk about your father and the events that led to the fall of Iran. I have my opinions of mistakes that were potentially made. I want to know what you think it was. And I'll make a list. I want to play a couple clips to you. A couple of the clips are in a book that I'm writing that I've been working on for 13 years. It's not coming out. It's something that I've worked on for many years. And he's in it. When I think about the fall of Iran, you'll typically hear about the fact that CIA was involved, MI6 was involved. That's why they fell. Okay. Jimmy Carter came in. He did the toast. If you can pull up the picture when you're looking at the toast between the two, you see this here. When I look at this, your dad looks very uncomfortable. And it's almost as if your dad is trying to be respectful, but doesn't trust an ounce of words coming out of Carter's mouth. But he's trying to be accommodating and respectful. And then Carter, at the same time, he's given a look of, you have no idea what I'm about to do to you when I leave this place. This is December 31st of 1977?
Correct.
And he leaves. And then next thing you know, the conditions get worse, and the rest is history. So CIA, MI6, the Shah. There's another documentary I watch about the 1954 oil consortium agreement that they had. That was a 25-year agreement that was coming to an end, and it was a way where originally it was an agreement they made in 1954, 50% of ownership to foreign companies. 40% of it was divided equally, 8% each. Among the 5 major American companies were British Petroleum, BP. They had 40% of it. Royal Dutch, Shell, they each had 14% of it. CFP, a French company, to receive 6% of it. And this was a very profitable venture, because if Iran's grown the way they are during that 25-year from 1954 to 1979, nobody wants to give up that annuity. Nobody wants to give up that investment. There's some documentaries done about the fact that it was a meeting in Central or South America about what they can do for your father to fall. That's a different conversation that comes up. And then there's a couple other things, comments that he made, way before there was a President Trump calling out the fake news. Your father was the first one that called out fake news. I don't know if you remember the interview. If you want to play this clip, I want to play this clip and kind of get your reaction of this. This is October 24th, 1976, I want to say, 60 Minutes. He's sitting with Mike Wallace. And you've seen this before, but I just want to get some commentary on this. Go ahead and play it, Rob.
Surely, Your Majesty, you're not telling me that the Jewish lobby in the United States pulls the strings of the presidency?
Not entirely, but I think even a little too much, even for Israel interests.
You think the Jewish lobby in the United States is too powerful for the interests of Israel?
I think so. Sometimes they are disserving the interests of Israel.
Explain.
Because they're pushing around too many people.
How do you mean pushing around?
Well, pressuring. They have many means at their disposal. They are putting up pressure on many, many people. And at the end, I don't think that it will even help Israel.
Why, if this is true, why would the President of the United States pay attention to that lobby?
They are strong.
Strong in what sense?
They are controlling many things.
Controlling what?
Newspapers, medias,
Your Majesty.
banks, finances, and I'm going to stop there.
Well, now wait just a second. You really do believe that the Jewish community in the United States is that powerful? They make the media reflect their view of foreign policy?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They do not report, we do not report honestly?
I love how he corrects here.
Don't mix things, please. I don't say the media. I say in the media they have people. Not the entire media. Some newspapers will only reflect their views, yes.
No?
This next part's important.
The New York Times, for instance, is owned by the Salzburger family, who are Jewish. Are you suggesting that the New York Times is biased in its treatment of the question of Zionism, Israel's existence, the United States' relationship with the Arab world?
I will have to put all the articles of the New York Times written on this subject and draw the conclusion. You can put this to the computer and it will answer you.
What you're saying is that, yes, you do believe.
Well, let's wait for the answer of the computer.
Washington Post?
The same.
The networks?
Less.
I must say you are speaking with your characteristic candor.
Pause right there. So when you're hearing that to today, CIA MI6, Jimmy Carter, 1954 Oil Consortium, him calling out mainstream media, and then I'll give you this last 20-second clip if you want to play this, Rob, when he's being interviewed on, not this one, the one where it's right there, the first 20 seconds, if you can play this.
Probably, and maybe more, because we are going to invest in the UK.
Have you been able to assure the British government that you'll be investing much of the money we pay you for your oil in British industry?
Sure, because I think that our
Right
country
here.
in the next 10 years will be what you are
The
today.
smile coming up. He can't hold it.
In the next 25 years, according to other people, I'm not saying that, will be among the 5 most prosperous countries of the world. When you
Pause it
become
right there.
something like that,
So to me, I am I enjoy sports post-game interview more than the game. I'm that guy. Like, I like to watch Michael Jordan's interview after the game. Great game you had. I want to know how you're going to answer the question. I want to know how LeBron answers the question, or Michael, or Brady, of all this stuff, right? I was born in this country. I lived there 10 years. CIA MI6, oil, Jimmy Carter, him calling out mainstream media, you don't mess with those guys, and him calling out the enemy in their eyes saying, we're about to pass you guys up, where his ambitions are being revealed. Were those any of the reasons for the fall of Iran?
It certainly is part of the reasons. And I think for most people who heard the rhetoric and the narrative of his arch enemies, that he was a puppet of the West or anything along those lines, this proves how much he cared and valued the interests of our country, to the point of risking his own throne, knowing that some will not take it the right way and may plot against him.
Very risky.
Well, but that proves his sense of national
Absolutely,
duty, and
absolutely.
I think then history will be judged for that. But to be honest with it, look, there's so many components to what happened, and I think it would be too easy to focus on some aspects only. The biggest challenge that my father faced was, and let's not forget one thing, most of the oil revenue that Iran generated did not happen until the late 60s, early 70s, because we were still selling, if I'm not mistaken, a barrel of oil at around $1.80 to about $2.20, something around those lines. It was not until it came up to about $7 to $8 range that it created more revenue for us. Of course, OPEC was formed. We were sensitive to the fact that if we overprice it, then the value of raw material that we'll be importing to Iran will also increase comparably. So it had to be a reasonable price. My father always believed that the price of oil was not fair as it was earlier. So eventually we generated more revenue, which allowed us to commit to much more heavy loaded project in terms of modernization, in terms of industry, in terms of everything that was done in the country in terms of infrastructure, including, of course, building schools and universities and what have you, and all sorts of facilities. But the critics at the time, in terms of the liberal debate, of why was the political sphere limited? Part of it is because, and again, I need to remind the audience that we're talking about the Cold War era. Many of the groups at the time who were critical of the regime were liberal in the sense that they wanted more political participation. But the actual groups that were waging literally war with the regime, including armed struggles, were Marxist groups that were aligned with Moscow. And Moscow's intention at the time was to find a way to somehow annex Iran. as they did in Czechoslovakia, as they did at the time. Iran never faltered.
Are you talking about the two-day group?
I'm talking about certain groups that were
right.
at
And
the
two-day
time
group,
there.
just so
and they aligned themselves with the Islamists, which led to this alliance that my father called the alliance of the red and black, which is red being the communists and black being the Islamists.
And to be fair, while on this topic, the spokesperson for Today Party pre your father used to be Mossadegh. That was one of the people that represented that community, the communists. Is that a fair statement?
Well, I think. Well, actually, most people forget that my father actually nominated Mossadegh to become the prime minister at the time because he believed he would be the best person to push the agenda for nationalization of oil for Iran. As a result of us nationalizing the oil, of course, the British were not happy about that, so our oil was boycotted, and all of a sudden that led to loss of revenue to the point that the Mossadegh government was becoming bankrupt. And it was not long before my father gave the farman to remove him from office, where the communists already had the Soviet flag floating inside Tehran on some, poles, flag poles, meaning that the danger was at the time that the country will fall into the hand of the Russians by means of the Today Party taking over. Those were the dynamics of the time. Now, if you took that into one sense and the argument for liberalization in terms of political participation, where is the balance? We didn't have at the time sufficient number of organized parties to create some level of balance. Most of the organized parties were these leftist or Marxist parties, including Today Party. So, and you pointed to the fact of how educated society was. Even today, people ask whether or not Iranians are ready to have true democratic, participation. I believe today, yes, but in realistic aspects, let's say the sphere for political openness was completely open. Who would have once, in a lopsided way, prevailed? Now, critics of my father's regime only focus on the fact that there was not political freedom in the sense that you had in the West. There was not. All other liberties was, but the political arena was restricted. But it was not just because he wanted so, because the circumstances was so. But he was still committed to reform. My point is that when we reached a stage where there was a political crisis in Iran, in 1978, a year preceding the revolution, there were many elements within Iran, some of them members of the National Front, who were urging that my father should take a step back from being directly involved in making the decision and become, not exceed the limit of a constitutional monarch and allow for him to, as they say, saltanat bokone na hukumat, which means he will reign and not rule. This was the whole argument then. But the climate went in the direction when the Islamists prevailed with the help of the Marxists, saying, no, we have to completely get rid of the Shah. And therefore, instead of seeking reform of the system, that in fact my father was willing to do that. I mean, this is all Monday morning quarterbacking, but these are the facts because, I've heard it both from this side of the aisle and the opponents of my parents over the past 40 years. And the fact was that there was an opportunity for reform, but it did not lead to that. Now, let's say if Gorbachev had happened 5 years earlier, maybe we would not be here right now. It would have been a different outcome. So to pin everything on foreign elements would not be really fair, but it's not untrue either. So that's one aspect. Some of it was domestic. I think mistakes were made on every front, including my own father. But the opposition, in my view, made more mistakes than he did because he was offering a possibility for reform. They didn't take that. They thought that actually, by bringing this cleric in charge, everything would change for the better. And as a result, by the time people found out what happened, it was too late. And since then, we've been faced with this regime. My point is, what is the lesson in all this? The lesson in all this is, my father at the time, I'm sorry, I forgot one more aspect, which is also important. Right after that clip that you showed me.
Which one?
The one with Carter being in Tehran and talking about all that. Well, the undercurrent was beginning to shape. And some of these governments, including the French government, who hosted Khomeini as a political refugee, which, by the way, under French law, if given that status of asylum, you are forbidden from conducting any kind of campaign against another government, which was what was assumed. But the French asked my father at the time, after he moved from Iraq to Paris and went to that location called Neuf-le-Château, which everybody remember. He was not in any form or shape continuing his campaign, and my father assumed that the French would obviously, in exchange for allowing him to go there. In fact, many before that were suggesting, should we get rid of him? And my father was not at all in agreement of making Khomeini a martyr. I'm telling you this because these are not the facts in history that most people have heard, because media didn't talk about it, the revolutionaries didn't talk about it, because these are the facts that happened at the time. My father refused, besides the behest of many of the governments, including the Carter administration, to stand firm. He said, I'm not going to turn my arms against my own people after 37 years of reign. I'm not going to stain my hands with the blood of my own people. And he left voluntarily. When they found out, by they I mean Carter and company, the Guadeloupe summit took place, the summit, where himself, Callahan, which was the British foreign minister, Helmut Schmidt, who I think at the time was the German chancellor, and the French president Giscard d'Estaing, they all decided, well, if we cannot rely on the Shah to maintain his power, we have no choice but to support Khomeini.
Did they want the fall? Did they want the fall because they knew the leverage and negotiation was all on your father's hands, because he was about to spike the prices of oil, where they had to go through him, and it was going to make you even a more powerful regime? Was it more that being their fear that they influenced the fall?
Well, I mean, remember that I think, if I'm not mistaken, at the time we were selling a barrel of oil at about $14 to $15, if I'm not mistaken. 3 months after the fall of my father, the price of oil spiked to all the way up to about $35. The North Sea oil was not cost effective under $17 a barrel. So I don't know what calculation was into play. Was it only a fear that price of oil will go higher? Well, it did higher as a result of the revolution.
No, I'm with you. I agree, because you at least have somebody that you can deal with. The new regime you have no relationship with. You think they're going to sit there and negotiate with you? They're going to do whatever they can to.
Look, nobody knew who this character is. Everybody thought that Khomeini is some kind of a religious guru, the nice old wise man who would go back to Rome and play his role. I mean, people like Andrew Yang call him a saint.
Andrew Yang, the guy that ran for office, UBI, the Democrat.
Yeah, it was the mayor in Atlanta, if I'm not mistaken, at the time, I think.
Andrew Yang. I got you. Andrew Yang called him a saint, yes.
And others really believed that he really is that clerical figure who could possibly be that. And he turned out to be...
far from a saint.
Far from a saint, because he brought in this ideology. Well, the rest is history, as we say. But we need to address these issues, because I think if our audience doesn't understand the complexity of what's at play in that region and the dynamics of it, and why Iran is so different than the other countries in the region, because our sense of identity with our national identity, as opposed to the prevailing religion, which is not the priority, makes us say always we are first Iranian, then we are, let's say, of this ethnic tendency or that religion. That's very important to understand. What do we relate to in terms of our national identity?
There's a part also for me that I wonder, a mistake that maybe your father was making. And by the way, listen, these are, quite frankly, more selfishly my own questions. The audience, is probably going to get value from it because I'm curious about it, but it's more my own reason for asking these questions. I think the challenge every leader has, you're a father, I'm a father, you're a leader, I'm a leader. When you're a leader, you try to, there's a great book written, The 5 Temptations of a CEO. One is you're trying to please everybody, okay? And I think there was an element of your father that was trying to please the poor, the socialist element, and he was trying to please the rich.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.